Welcome to another episode of Humanitarian Horizons, Christina DiArcangelo Unveiled. I am Christina DiArcangelo, and I am your hostess. Today's episode is personal, painful, and absolutely necessary. It's been a little bit since I've been in the recording studio. I've moved my recording studio, so there had been a lot going on. Anyway, I wanted to shoot today to talk about two very different criminal cases. One that's a national case and one that's deeply personal. I wanted the opportunity to shine a light on a broken justice system where timelines, power, and silence too often define who receives justice and who doesn't. So let's talk about the first case. Idaho's tragedy, a mass murder and a plea deal. So basically, to all you guys out there, my listeners and followers, I'm sure you guys are aware of the Bryan Kohberger case, wherein he was charged with the 2022 murders of four University of Idaho students in Moscow, Idaho. He faced 4 counts of first-degree murder. Recently, a plea agreement was reached that reportedly allowed Kohberger to avoid the death penalty without formally admitting guilt. This deal shocked many, including the families. While the terms are controversial, families were given the chance to read their victim impact statements without interruption, and the DA consulted them finalizing the plea agreement. National intention ensured that in that court, decorum, input, and recognition, even if justice felt compromised, the judge allowed the victims to ensure that they were heard, that their messages were loud and clear regarding what happened and how they felt, and why in the world did Bryan Kohberger do all these things. Now, in parallel, my mom's case is a much smaller case in comparison. There weren't 4 people killed in a university, a manhunt, and all these things that occurred. My mother, Paula S. DiArcangelo, was a victim of ongoing elder abuse in Chester County, Pennsylvania. On January 13th, 2023, my mother died. At that time, no charges had been filed by the Chester County DA's office. She died believing that the Chester County DA's office didn't care and that her suffering didn't matter. This is not hearsay. She told me this verbally multiple times, not to mention that she had called the police department who was handling the investigation more than one time, advising them that she was concerned. She was concerned about the charges. She was concerned for her safety. The DA's office had the necessary information, in my opinion, to file 4 charges before her death, but they waited. I still have no idea why they waited. The charges were finally filed February 9th of 2023, 4 weeks too late. My mother was not able to testify and to see that justice was served because, remember, she died January 13th of 2023. The delay meant there were several charges that could not be pursued because my mother couldn't testify that her bank card was being used by the defendants without her permission. But here's the question. Why couldn't her medical records be used? In hospital terms, they use software called electronic medical records, otherwise known as an EMR. The EMR is a validated software program that has timestamps on every time somebody is in there entering whatever information based on their login. And there's a full audit trail. So why couldn't we take a report out of the EMR and use that as evidence to further substantiate that my mother had said that these people were using her bank card without her permission? They had taken all of her money. Those hospital records included multiple notations from nurses and clinicians that my mother said this very fact. Her bank card was being used without her consent, and she was being held captive in the basement. Why didn't this matter? Why wasn't this enough? I have so many questions. Additionally, one of the defendants, Christopher Roos, was just recently arrested again because he had almost a year ago in August of last year, he had fled a Chester County court-appointed rehab while in their custody. fled. He fled. I found out about his fleeing the day that I was at the hearing for the sentencing for David Frame. So I find out after I get through the sentencing hearing for David Frame, who had delayed the sentencing, I don't even know how many times. And later I found out it was because he was trying to get a job. Anyway, I find out that day that Christopher Roos had escaped custody. And not only did he escape, he escaped a couple of days prior to anyone even knowing about it, to the DA's office even knowing about it. Was there an investigation that was done on those people that allowed this to happen? How did this happen? How can you leave a court-appointed rehab? Just leave. How does this happen? I don't understand. So what happened to that investigation? I've not seen any reports. I've asked about it multiple times. It just got brushed under the rug. No idea what happened. After many months of this delay, and I mean many, right? We're at July here, the end of July. My nephew, yes, that's right, folks. It was my nephew, was arrested about a week ago. He had been on the run that long. And I had given the information to the Chester County DA's office in the spring as to where I thought he was and who he was talking to. What do you think happened last Friday? He was with one of the people I mentioned, and he was in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, like I said. Was I taken into consideration at all any of the information I advised them on? All these times I've been advising them on all these things in pursuit of these two defendants. I've been right every time, every freaking time, and they didn't listen to me again. So here we are again. I had requested at the time of Christopher's rearrest that we vacate the plea agreement. In my opinion, he does not deserve a plea agreement. He obviously admitted that he's guilty because he ran away. Someone who's not guilty doesn't run away. They face the charges, they hope for the best, and they move on. We already know what happened with the David Frame issue. He got 48 hours in jail only because he was a rude person and was interrupting me when I was trying to do my victim impact statement. That's right, folks. During David Frame's sentencing in August of 2023, I was interrupted while delivering my victim impact statement. And guess what? The ADA said nothing. She said not one word, nothing. While I am standing next to her on the one side of me, and then the male attorney that was representing David Frame was standing to my left. And then David Frame was standing next to him, okay? Very close in proximity to where I was standing at a podium addressing the court. Finally being able to say what's on my mind. Finally being able to address the court so they understand what had happened here, the severity of this crime. And I was interrupted. Unlike in Idaho, families were honored. I was silenced by the defendant when I should have been protected and my mother's memory should have been preserved. We should have been focusing on what happened to my mother because that's why we were there. We were there because of a crime that was committed against my mother. So I have a lot of questions, a lot. Why weren't the charges filed before my mother died? Why weren't homicide charges considered? Because my mother died shortly after she was removed from the basement by the authorities because of my call to 911. Why wasn't that taken into consideration? Why wasn't that explored? Why wasn't all of her mental health issues that she suffered after she got out of the basement as a result of what happened to her? God only knows what exactly happened. We only know certain parts, okay? We don't know everything. We don't know all the torture that she went through. We have no idea. And now she's in an urn. She's in an urn in my home. That's where she lies, in an urn. Why weren't the validated electronic medical records allowed to be entered in as admissible evidence? Why was the silence from the ADA considered acceptable when I was interrupted in court? Why? Why was that allowed? Why did my mother have to leave this world thinking that she didn't matter? That nobody cared about her. The questions don't haunt me. Let me be clear. They do not haunt me. They fuel me because no one else's mother should ever leave this world believing that the system abandoned her. That is unacceptable. This episode is more than a reflection. It's a demand for accountability to the Chester County DA's office, to legislators like Senator McCormick, Senator Fetterman, and heck, Why not Governor Shapiro, as his office is fully aware of this crime? I had called up there myself multiple times. To everyone listening, do not look away. I wrote a book entitled Rescuing Mom because I want to let every person know my mother's story, because her story shouldn't be buried with her as it relates to her being in an urn in ash form. It's time that we ask not just what's wrong, but who is going to fix it? Who's going to fix it? I have been trying to use my voice. I've been trying to educate people about this, about the failure of justice, about elder abuse, and about crime in general, and how prosecution works, and how it appears that the justice system is imploding. This is not acceptable, not at all. Thank you for listening to Humanitarian Horizons. Christina DiArcangelo Unveiled. Until next time, stay aware, stay vocal, stay fighting, and always, always be resilient. Thank you.